The brazier has been grumbling all evening, claiming the pavilion has grown too quiet. Yet the moment a few familiar footsteps echoed at the door, even the old kettle seemed pleased enough to whistle louder. "Come in, friends of the Jianghu. Someone has brought fresh rumors from the Cursed Soil domain, and judging by the look on his face, this tale is worth more than a cart full of spirit stones." A fragment from a forgotten chronicle records a sea of blood hidden beneath the Cursed Soil Sect, where countless innocent lives were sacrificed for sinister cultivation. There, Chu Feng uncovered both unspeakable cruelty and the true face of Tantai Xue, while an ancient vendetta finally erupted as Tantai Yingming confronted the infamous Cursed Soil 7. Yet, just as vengeance seemed within reach, a terrifying formation turned the battle around. And now, at the brink of despair, a sudden voice breaks the silence. The strangest gates are not always the ones sealed by formations. Sometimes the most dangerous door is the one left half open. After taking on the identities of Cursed Soil Sect elders, Chu Feng and his companions entered enemy territory with surprising ease. That ease itself was suspicious. A forbidden region hidden in the deepest part of such a wicked sect should have been guarded like a dragon's reverse scale. Yet recently, its defenses had loosened. Through quiet investigation, they discovered what they had come for. Tantai Xue was being held within that forbidden area, but this place was no ordinary prison. In recent days, the Cursed Soil Sect had been capturing living beings without restraint, not just humans, not just cultivators. Monstrous beasts, ordinary animals, even harmless creatures were dragged in like offerings. Anything that breathed could be seized. Because of this, many core elders and powerful core disciples were being allowed to enter the forbidden zone simply to help transport the endless captives. Seen from the outside, this looked like chaos. But to anyone who understood evil sects, chaos can be a mask for ritual. Chu Feng watched the captives being taken inside, and his instincts tightened. A righteous power might gather people to protect them. A demonic power gathers living beings for only one reason. Someone, somewhere, intends to turn life into fuel. Dugu Xingfeng understood the same thing. He warned Chu Feng through voice transmission that the Cursed Soil Sect had never truly been righteous. Its place among the 9 powers did not cleanse its roots. Some forces wear the robe of legitimacy only because the world is too complicated to tear that robe away. So the group entered. At first, nothing seemed unbearable. Cursed Soil Sect members escorted ordinary people deeper into the forbidden region, and the path itself gave no immediate answer. But the farther Chu Feng walked, the heavier the air became. Then came the smell. Blood. At first it was faint, like a warning carried by the wind. Then it thickened. Step by step, the scent grew sharper, fouler, impossible to ignore. Along with it came screams. Distant at first, then clearer, then so miserable that even seasoned cultivators could feel the cold edge behind them. This was not the sound of battle. This was slaughter. When they finally reached the source, even Chu Feng, who had seen countless cruel things in the cultivation world, was shaken. Before them stretched an enormous lake, so wide its edges could not be seen, but it was not water that filled it. It was blood. Human blood. Beast blood. The blood of countless innocent lives. The Cursed Soil Sect's people were killing the captives before casting them into the lake. Once the bodies fell in, some hidden power refined them, leaving nothing behind but more crimson liquid to feed that dreadful reservoir. For cultivators, slaughter is not uncommon. Battles between experts can destroy mountains, cities, and clans. But this was different. This was not war. This was not revenge. This was the systematic harvesting of the weak by those who had power and no conscience. Chu Feng's fists tightened until his bones cracked. He was not afraid. He was angry. And this anger mattered. In a world ruled by strength, many cultivators numb themselves to suffering. They call it fate. They call it the law of survival. But Chu Feng's Dao heart had not yet accepted that excuse. To him, power without conscience was not glory. It was corruption wearing a crown. Dugu Xingfeng and the others were calmer, not because they approved, but because they had lived long enough to understand the world's ugliness. They had seen what hidden sects, old monsters, and desperate experts were capable of when a bottleneck stood before them. Dugu Xingfeng judged the situation quickly. This lake was likely not meant for ordinary elders or disciples. A ritual of this scale was too vast. The Cursed Soil Sect would not mobilize so many people and risk so much attention unless someone truly important needed it. Most likely, an old monster of the Cursed Soil Sacred Assembly was attempting a breakthrough, and that changed the meaning of everything. This blood lake was not merely a crime. It was a cultivation resource, a demonic method, a mountain of lives stacked beneath the feet of someone trying to climb one step higher. That is the terrifying truth of wicked cultivation. To righteous cultivators, a breakthrough may require comprehension, tempering, inheritance, or heavenly opportunity. But to demonic cultivators, the lives of others can become pills, formations, sacrifices, and stepping stones. Chu Feng struggled to accept it. He knew such methods existed, but knowing of evil and standing before its result are two different things. Millions of lives had been dragged here, not because they had offended a sect, not because they had chosen a battlefield, but because they were weak enough to be used. Dugu Xingfeng's gaze turned cautious. If such a cruel method had been prepared, then the person behind it could not be ordinary. And if that person succeeded, the balance of power around the Cursed Soil Sect might shift in a dangerous direction. Chu Feng then asked the question that any young cultivator with a righteous heart would ask. How could such a power stand among the 9 powers? How could the holy land of martialism allow a sect like this to exist? Were great powers not supposed to eliminate evil, defend justice, and protect the common people? This was not a childish question. It was the question every cultivator must face before their ideals collide with reality. Dugu Xingfeng's answer was heavy. Eliminating evil sounds simple when spoken aloud. But who would pay the price? The Cursed Soil Sect was not a small gang that could be erased overnight. If one major power marched against it, even victory would come with terrible losses. And once weakened, that victorious power might be swallowed by another force, waiting in the shadows. That is the cruelty of the cultivation world. Justice is not only a matter of will, it is also a matter of strength, timing, and consequence. Even if the Cursed Soil Sect were destroyed, could one also destroy every other monstrous power? Could one force the 4 clans, the 3 palaces, and even the ancient era's elves to obey a single righteous order? Without absolute strength, peace is only a wish, a noble wish perhaps, but still a wish. Dugu Xingfeng did not defend the Cursed Soil Sect's actions. He simply revealed the hard truth behind why such powers continued to exist. A war between overlord forces could cause even more deaths than the wicked acts hidden in the dark. Sometimes the world tolerates poison because cutting it out would make the whole body bleed. Miao Renlong also added his warning. What Chu Feng saw today was horrifying because it was before his eyes. But elsewhere, unseen by him, there might be acts 10 times, 100 times, even 1,000 times more vile. Those victims also died without help. Those cries also vanished into silence. What then? Would Chu Feng try to save everyone? Could he? At that moment, Chu Feng understood. Not because his anger disappeared, but because he saw the size of the world more clearly. The strong devour the weak. This law was not righteous, but it was real. And before a cultivator can change the world, he must first survive it. Before Chu Feng could speak of saving all beings, he still had to save the person he had come here for. Even that mission required disguises, secrecy, and the support of peak experts. This was the lesson hidden inside the Blood Lake. Compassion alone cannot overturn evil. Rage alone cannot protect the innocent. If a cultivator wishes to interfere with the karma of the world, he must possess the strength to bear the backlash. That does not mean one should become numb. It does not mean one should ignore suffering forever. But it does mean that a Tao heart must be matched by power. Otherwise, righteousness becomes impulse, and impulse can drag allies into death. Chu Feng stood there facing the proof of the Cursed Soil Sect's depravity, and the weight of the world pressed harder on him than any enemy palm strike. He had entered this forbidden place to find Tantai Xue. But now he had seen something larger than one prisoner, larger than one rescue, larger than one sect's cruelty. Somewhere within this cursed ground, an old monster might be preparing to rise higher by stepping on countless lives. And if this sea of blood was only the preparation, then the true danger hidden deeper inside had not yet shown its face. There are moments when righteousness is not measured by how fast a cultivator draws his sword, but by whether he has the wisdom until that sword can truly change fate. As Chu Feng moved deeper through the cursed soil domain, and his heart was not calm. Before his eyes were innocence suffering under a power that had long abandoned any right to call itself a sect. The Cursed Soil Sect did not merely rule with cruelty. It treated common lives as materials, as offerings, as tools for strengthening itself. And for someone like Chu Feng, that kind of evil was not something he could ignore. But this is where his Tao heart showed its maturity. A reckless hero would have rushed forward, spilled blood for a moment of justice, and then died before saving anyone who truly mattered. Chu Feng was not that kind of fool. His conscience burned, yes, but he also understood the cruel law of the cultivation world. Good intentions without strength are only another path to disaster. So he endured, not because he accepted what he saw, not because fear had chained his heart, but because the person he could still save was Tantai Xue, and if he threw away his life now, then even that hope would vanish. Yet as he moved on, a vow quietly took root inside him. One day, when his strength was enough, he would return to this cursed land. One day, he would make the Cursed Soil Sect answer for every innocent life it had trampled. He could not cleanse all injustice beneath the heavens, but the sins placed before his eyes had already formed karma with him. And karma, once formed, does not disappear. Dugu Xingfeng and the others saw this change in him. They did not need Chu Feng to shout his oath aloud. At their level, they could read a young cultivator's heart from the way he restrained his anger. What pleased them was not merely his righteousness, but his restraint. A righteous man without wisdom becomes calamity. A righteous man with patience may one day become fortune for the entire holy land of martialism. So they continued forward. The deeper they went, the uglier the truth became. The Cursed Soil Sect's crimes were not isolated acts of cruelty. They were systematic. Living people were being used in experiments, treated as if their pain, blood, and lives were nothing more than resources. This was not a sect walking a crooked path. This was a power sinking into demonic methods while still standing openly in the world. But the rescue party could not afford to expose itself too early. They moved like shadows, suppressing their killing intent and choosing only what served the mission. A few important members of the Cursed Soil Sect were silently removed, and their identities became masks for the intruders. In the cultivation world, infiltration is often more dangerous than open battle. A blade can be blocked, a formation can be broken, but one wrong aura, one suspicious glance, one hidden restriction missed by the eye, and the whole enemy nest may awaken. Still, with experts like these moving together, the plan succeeded. At last, they reached the place where Tantai Xue was supposed to be imprisoned. The cell before them was heavily protected. Its defenses were not weak, but against Dugu Xingfeng and the others, they were not impossible to break. The problem was never whether they had the power. The problem was whether using that power would trigger something worse. Was Tantai Xue truly inside? Were there traps waiting beyond the barrier? Would breaking the defenses alert the Cursed Soil Sect and turn a rescue into a battlefield? These were the questions that separated veteran experts from hot-blooded juniors. In enemy territory, strength is only one part of survival. Caution is the other half. So they did not strike. Instead, they concealed themselves and investigated first. For the World Spiritist Alliance Master, Miao Renlong, and Hong Xiang, seeing through a sealed cell was no great challenge. Their world spirit techniques had reached a level where barriers could no longer hide ordinary secrets. But among them, Chu Feng possessed something even more unusual, his heaven's eyes. When Chu Feng focused his sight on the cell, the defensive layers that should have hidden everything began to lose their mystery. Bit by bit, the barrier's concealment faded, and the scene within revealed itself. And what he saw was not what he expected. The prison was not filthy. It was not dark in the way common dungeons were dark. Instead, it was grand, almost luxurious, as if the Cursed Soil Sect had not locked away a prisoner but placed a treasure on display. There, bound by dark chains upon a radiant throne of gold and jade, sat a young woman in white. Her figure was graceful, her presence cold and distant, and her face was enough to make even a composed cultivator pause. She was not merely pretty. In the holy land of martialism, beauty was not rare, but this was different. Her features carried a kind of otherworldly perfection, the kind that made people feel they were looking at someone who did not belong among ordinary mortals. Her eyes seemed deep and unreachable, like a frozen night sky filled with stars. Her face was flawless, yet the emotion resting upon it was not warmth. It was melancholy, silence, and distance. She looked like a celestial fairy sealed inside a cage. For a moment, even Chu Feng had to question what he was seeing. Because the Tantai Xue he remembered had been ugly to an almost shocking degree, her appearance had been so unpleasant that no one would connect her to the woman before him. But aura does not lie. Faces can be disguised, bodies can be altered, even presence can be restrained. But the deeper imprint of a cultivator, once remembered by someone like Chu Feng, is not so easily mistaken. This woman was Tantai Xue, and that meant the face he had known before was false. Seen from this angle, her disguise suddenly made sense. A woman with beauty like this would draw attention wherever she went. Admiration, greed, obsession, schemes, all of it would follow her like shadows. For someone with Tantai Xue's cold and solitary nature, such attention would only be a burden. So she had hidden herself in the most extreme way possible. She had not made herself ordinary. She had made herself repulsive. That choice revealed more about her than beauty ever could. Tantai Xue did not live to be admired. She did not seek closeness, praise, or desire. She would rather walk the world misunderstood than allow others to approach her for shallow reasons. And Chu Feng, after the first shock passed, felt relief more than anything else, because Tantai Xue was alive. She was bound, yes. Imprisoned, yes. But there were no signs of torture on her body. The Cursed Soil Sect had captured her, yet they had not visibly harmed her. In a place like this, that alone was precious news. For Chu Feng, it meant the rescue still had time. But then Hong Qiang's voice reached him through transmission, and the surprise deepened. Tantai Xue was not merely alive. She had become a rank 2 half-martial emperor. Only then did Chu Feng realize that he had been so focused on recognizing her true face that he had overlooked the change in her cultivation. Her aura was far stronger than before, stronger than Xianxia, stronger than what most young geniuses of the Holy Land could even dream of reaching, and this struck Chu Feng in a different way. Since entering the Holy Land of martialism, his own progress had been frightening. He had risen through danger, fortune, battle, and inheritance at a speed that would make countless disciples despair. Yet even after all of that, he still had not surpassed Tantai Xue. She remained ahead. This was the true weight of the discovery. Tantai Xue was not only a hidden beauty, she was a hidden monster of talent. A woman who concealed her face, concealed her loneliness, and now stood revealed as an even greater cultivator than Chu Feng had understood. But she was still chained inside the heart of the enemy's forbidden ground, and the stronger she was, the more dangerous the question became. Why would the Cursed Soil Sect imprison someone like her in such a strange, guarded place? What did they want from her? And if Chu Feng and his allies made one wrong move, would they be rescuing a friend? Or awakening the true trap that had been waiting around her all along? Behind enemy walls, the most dangerous blade is not always the one raised in battle. Sometimes it is the one already standing beside the enemy, waiting for the moment karma opens its eyes. Chu Feng and the others had finally reached the place where Tantai Xue was being held. But what they saw inside that prison was far heavier than a simple captive and her guards. Around her stood some of the Cursed Soil Sect's true old monsters. The World Spiritist Alliance master immediately recognized the weight of the lineup. These were not ordinary elders. Among them were figures from the previous generation of the Cursed Soil 7, names that had once represented the strongest young talents of that dark sect. At first, Chu Feng thought all 7 beside the Cursed Soil Sect's headmaster were that former generation, but the Alliance master corrected him. One of them, Huang Dongsheng, was merely an elder of the Cursed Soil Sacred Assembly. The real Cursed Soil 7 included Sang Kun himself and 6 others. That detail mattered. Sang Kun was not only the current headmaster. In his youth, he had also walked the same path as the elite disciples he later trained. The title of Cursed Soil 7 was not just a group name. It was a tradition, a method of inheritance, a way for the sect to keep producing sharp blades generation after generation. And now, those old blades had gathered in one place. For Chu Feng's side, this was no longer a casual rescue. If they acted carelessly, they would be clashing with 8 peak half-martial emperors inside the territory of a monstrous power. One mistake, one burst of aura, one ripple of battle, and the entire Cursed Soil Sacred Assembly might awaken. So the Alliance Master made the decision. Hong Qiang would join him in Miao Renlong to set up a sealing formation first. This formation was not meant to merely hide them. It had to lock down the whole area, swallow sound, suppress movement, isolate air currents, and prevent even the smallest disturbance from leaking out. Once complete, they could strike, rescue Tantai Xue, and deal with Sang Kun's group before the storm spread. But formations of that level are not drawn with casual strokes, especially not when the targets are peak half-martial emperors. The 3 world spiritists had to work with extreme precision because the formation itself could not alert the enemy before it was finished. Dugu Xingfeng, unable to assist in the spirit formation, took the role of guard. The headmaster of Cyanwood Mountain stood watch with killing intent hidden beneath calm eyes, prepared to erase anyone who wandered too close. That left Chu Feng with no direct task. But Chu Feng was never truly idle. He turned his heaven's eyes toward the prison and watched every movement inside. He could not hear the conversation, yet his eyes were sharp enough to read the shape of their words. By watching their mouths, he slowly pieced together the truth. And the truth was strange. Sang Kun was not raging. He was not torturing Tantai Xue. He was speaking to her almost gently, asking her to reveal the location of the talismanic soul-absorbing flute. He had gathered the people she requested, and now he wanted her end of the bargain. For a man whose disciples had been killed, his attitude was far too calm. Tantai Xue tested that calm directly. She reminded him that she had killed the disciples he supposedly valued. Was he truly willing to let her live? Sang Kun's answer revealed the cold heart of a sect master who saw people as resources. Xianxia and the others had talent, yes, and their deaths caused him pain. But compared to Tantai Xue, they were replaceable. To him, if their deaths could be exchanged for gaining a more terrifying genius, then those deaths had value. He promised her safety. He promised her status. He even offered to take her as his personal disciple and one day hand her the position of Cursed Soil Sect headmaster. In his words, she could become the first woman to rule the sect. Only then did Chu Feng understand why Tantai Xue had survived this long. Sang Kun had not spared her out of mercy. He had spared her because greed had outweighed hatred. In the eyes of such a man, disciples were not family. They were chess pieces. And when a stronger piece appeared on the board, even years of nurturing could be discarded without hesitation. The other old men joined in, urging Tantai Xue to accept. They spoke as if the Cursed Soil Sect was generous, as if surrender could erase blood debt, as if ambition could be wrapped in kind words and called sincerity. But Tantai Xue only laughed. It was not the laugh of someone tempted. It was cold, distant, and full of hidden killing intent. She had not gathered these people to negotiate. She had not brought the old generation together to bow before them. She had called them here for one reason: their lives. The moment that meaning settled, the balance inside the cell shattered. Huang Dongsheng suddenly moved. A royal armament dagger appeared in his hand, and before anyone could react, he drove it into the dantian of one of Sang Kun's junior brothers. For cultivators, the dantian is not merely flesh. It is the furnace of cultivation, the vault of power, the foundation of a lifetime's Tao path. When that dagger trembled and the dantian burst, the old man's strength collapsed with it. He fell like an empty shell. Sang Kun and the others were stunned. This was not an enemy charging from outside. This was betrayal from within their own circle. And that kind of strike is always the most terrifying, because before a cultivator can defend against a blade, he must first believe that blade is hostile. They demanded to know if Huang Dongsheng had lost his mind, but the man only laughed coldly. Then his appearance began to change. The face of everything vanished, and in its place stood a white-haired old man with the sharp, stern bearing of someone whose hatred had been tempered over many years. His hair was like snow, yet his face still carried the strength of middle age. His eyes were not confused, not frightened, and not reckless. They were filled with old vengeance. And in that instant, the prison was no longer just the site of a rescue. It had become the stage for a hidden grudge, a buried identity, and a killing game that even Sang-kun had failed to see coming. Outside, Chu Feng watched through his heaven's eyes as the secret finally tore open. But one question now hung heavier than any formation, any dagger, any promise of power. Who was this man really? And what hatred had he carried into the heart of the Cursed Soil Sect? Some debts in the cultivation world do not fade with time. They sleep beneath white hair, beneath bent backs, beneath 1,000 years of silence. Until the day the debtor stands face to face with the monsters who forgot they ever sinned. Inside that sealed prison, the Cursed Soil Sect's headmaster and his sworn martial brothers stared at the old man before them with confusion. That alone was chilling. The hatred in his eyes was deep enough to freeze a soul, yet to them, he was only a stranger. And that was the first cruelty of this moment. For the wicked, slaughter can become just another memory buried beneath power, status, and cultivation resources. But for the survivor, every scream remains carved into the bones. The white-haired elder did not rush to strike. Not yet. Before blades and talismans, there had to be judgment. He reminded them of a crime from long ago, back when these men were not yet the terrifying elders of the Cursed Soil Sect. They had once been disciples sent to the eastern region of the Cursed Soil domain, to the Tantai family, under the excuse of borrowing an item. When the Tantai family refused, these disciples turned request into massacre. Not negotiation, not punishment, extermination. And the most poisonous part was not only the killing. It was what came after. That bloody deed had not ruined their futures. It had built them. The sect valued their cruelty, rewarded their obedience, and poured resources into them. Step by step, corpse by corpse, they climbed until they became the infamous Cursed Soil 7. Seen from this angle, their rise was not a tale of talent. It was a monument built on buried clans. Only then did the headmaster begin to remember. A family destroyed, a child spared, a frightened boy who had been humiliated in front of his killers, the Cursed Soil. 7 laughed when they recalled it. To them, that boy had been weak, disgraceful, not even worth killing. They mocked the shame he endured, as if humiliation erased blood debt. But the old man's eyes only grew colder, because that boy had not survived out of cowardice. He had survived for karma. His name was Tantai Yingming, and for thousands of years, he had carried one reason for breathing: to stand before these men and make the dead receive an answer. That is the kind of hatred ordinary cultivators fear most. Not loud rage, not reckless fury. A hatred that can kneel, crawl, swallow shame, and wait through centuries is far more dangerous than any sudden killing intent. Then the old survivor moved. The dagger in his hand was only a royal armament, but in his grasp, it screamed with power beyond its grade. A weapon is never judged only by its material. In the hands of a man who had refined resentment into purpose for thousands of years, even a lesser blade could carry the weight of an emperor's wrath. His first target was Sang-kun, the headmaster himself. But the Cursed Soil 7 had not become legends by relying on reputation alone. 6 peak half-martial emperors immediately joined together to stop him. In an instant, the prison became a battlefield of terrifying pressure. Had that chamber been ordinary stone and iron, it would have collapsed under the shockwaves alone. But this was the Cursed Soil Sect's hidden ground, built to contain dangerous secrets. Even so, the force inside was enough to make any junior cultivator understand the gap between realms. 7 peak, half-martial emperors clashed in one enclosed space. Yet amid that chaos, something important became clear. Neither side allowed the battle to touch Tantai Xue. For Tantai Yingming, she was kin, the final hope of the Tantai bloodline. For the Cursed Soil Sect, she was a rare genius too valuable to destroy. Even though she hated them, even though her heart clearly stood against them, they still wanted to bend her into their own weapon. That is the cold logic of overlord powers. A genius is not merely a person. A genius is future strength, future prestige, future domination. To a sect like Cursed Soil, morality means nothing, but talent is sacred if it can be controlled. Outside the prison, Chu Feng and his allies watched while maintaining their hidden formation. Miao Renlong quickly understood the deeper scheme. Tantai Xue had not simply been captured by accident. Her capture may have been bait, a desperate move to gather the Cursed Soil 7 in one place so the old survivor could finally strike at the root of his clan's hatred. This was not a rescue anymore. It was revenge wrapped inside a rescue, and Chu Feng had stepped into a blood feud older than his own path in the holy land of martialism. Hongqiang's judgment was even sharper. Tantai Yingming was not an ordinary peak, half-martial emperor. Facing 6 opponents of the same realm, he did not fall behind. In fact, he faintly pressed them back. That detail matters. Among cultivators, equal realm does not mean equal strength. Battle experience, Dao heart, secret arts, endurance, killing intent, and comprehension can create terrifying differences. Tantai Yingming had spent centuries tempering himself for one battle. His cultivation may have stopped below martial emperor, but his resolve had been sharpened beyond ordinary limits. Hongqiang even believed that, given time, this old man might still have a chance to step into the martial emperor realm within 1,000 years. That was not casual praise. It meant Tantai Yingming stood at the edge of a heavenly gate, and this revenge battle might become either the release of his obsession or the final knot binding his path. Inside the cell, the battle intensified. The Cursed Soil Elders unleashed talismans filled with different powers: fire, wind, lightning, and other violent elements. Each talisman carried destructive martial force, and in a normal battlefield, such attacks could tear armies apart. But Tantai Yingming moved like a ghost between curses and explosions. He did not fight like a man overwhelmed by 6 enemies. He fought like someone who had studied them for lifetimes. Every movement carried purpose. Every counterattack carried memory. Every dodge seemed to say, "I have imagined this moment more times than you have drawn breath." Then his cold mockery cut into them. "The Cursed Soil 7, he said, were only truly terrifying when all 7 stood together. Without one brother, they were merely loud dogs with no bite." That insult struck the hidden wound. Because his first strike had not been random. He had pierced the 7th brother's dantian at the start, precisely to prevent their full formation from taking shape. Tantai Yingming knew the danger of the Cursed Soil 7 slaughtering formation. That was why he had acted before they could unite. For a moment, it seemed his strategy had worked. But in the cultivation world, the most dangerous enemies are often those who should already be dead. Sang Kun sneered and called out to the fallen 7th brother, telling him to stop pretending. Then the elder, whose dantian had been pierced, rose from the ground. This was the turn that chilled the battlefield. Tantai Yingming had aimed correctly. His attack had not missed. The dagger had ruined a dantian, but the 7th brother possessed something rare and sinister: 2 dantians. One had been crippled, yet the other still preserved his cultivation. This was more than a physical trick. It was a reminder that demonic sects often survive through methods righteous cultivators do not expect: forbidden bodies, strange cultivation paths, hidden organs of power. Such things are exactly why a single miscalculation against an evil sect can reverse an entire battle. The 7th brother did not waste time. He took out a scroll, wrapped it around his waist, and released a dark purple aura. His presence twisted immediately, no longer resembling that of a normal elder. It was as if a human shell had opened to reveal something crueler beneath. Then the others followed. One by one, the remaining 6 brought out matching scrolls. Around their waists, the talisman scrolls awakened. Dark purple light connected their auras, and the atmosphere of the prison changed. This was the Cursed Soil 7 slaughtering formation. And the terrifying thing about formations is this: they do not merely add strength. A true formation can merge intent, realm, bloodlust, and secret technique into a power far beyond the sum of its parts. Moments earlier, Tantai Yingming had been pressuring 6 peak half-martial emperors. Now all 7 stood together. Their auras surged so violently that even Chu Feng, watching from outside the cell and unable to fully sense the pressure within, felt suffocated just by witnessing it. In that instant, the boundary of peak half-martial emperor seemed to blur. The Cursed Soil no longer felt like men standing beneath the martial emperor realm. They felt as if they had forced one foot across that forbidden threshold. And for Tantai Yingming, who had waited thousands of years for revenge, the true battle had only just begun. Because sometimes karma does not arrive as a clean blade. Sometimes it arrives facing 7 monsters, a forbidden formation, and the dreadful question of whether hatred alone can overcome power stolen from the edge of an emperor's realm. When 7 monsters borrow forbidden power, the first question is not whether they have become emperors. The first question is whether anyone in the room can survive long enough to expose the lie. Chu Feng had seen true martial emperors before. That experience now became more valuable than any treasure, because while the Cursed Soil 7's auras had surged to a terrifying height, he could still sense the boundary they had failed to cross. Their pressure was monstrous, yes. Their formation was unnatural, yes. But they were not martial emperors. They were still half-martial emperors. And yet, that did not make the situation safe, because strength in the cultivation world is not measured only by title. A peak half-martial emperor with fear in his eyes has already admitted the truth before a single word is spoken. Tantai Yingming understood it clearly. The 7 before him, empowered by their cursed method, had risen beyond what he could handle. Then the Cursed Soil 7 moved as one. Each of them produced a talisman, and in the next breath, 7 sinister papers fused together into a single weapon of dark purple power. It became a giant hammer wrapped in ghostly flames, heavy with the aura of a forbidden art. Tantai Yingming reacted instantly. He gathered his martial power and formed a golden Buddha-like defense before himself. Sacred and radiant, the kind of defensive martial skill that would make ordinary experts despair. Chu Feng could tell at once that even his strongest current attack would barely scratch such a barrier. But what happened next revealed the cruelty of the Cursed Soil Sect's hidden methods. The dark purple hammer came crashing down. That sacred golden defenses shattered, not because Tantai Yingming was weak, not because his technique was flawed, but because the talisman hammer carried a special power, a power designed not merely to strike, but to invade and destroy from within. The hammer rose again and slammed into Tantai Yingming's body. He was thrown back against the prison wall, blood forced from his mouth, his aura instantly thrown into disorder. Chu Feng's heart tightened. This was not a distant enemy being punished. This was Tantai Xue's kin, a senior who had risked himself, and if he fell here before the rescue formation was complete, the whole mission could collapse. Chu Feng immediately urged the elders beside him to act. But Dugu Xingfeng, Hong Qiang, Miao Renlong, and the World Spiritist Alliance Master refused. Their reason was cold, but correct. The spirit formation was not finished. If they revealed themselves too early, Sang Kun and the others would call for reinforcements. And once the Cursed Soil Sect's wider forces were alerted, their stealthy infiltration would become meaningless. This is the bitter arithmetic of high-level rescue missions. In the mortal world, charging forward may look heroic. In the cultivation world, charging too soon may kill everyone. Chu Feng still worried that Tantai Yingming would die. The Alliance Master judged otherwise. If the Cursed Soil 7 had wanted him dead immediately, that hammer strike could have ended it. The fact that Tantai Yingming still breathed meant they had another intention. Torment. Miao Renlong understood it as well. The Cursed Soil 7 were not finished enjoying their cruelty. Hong Qiang then gave the harshest conclusion. Tantai Yingming's suffering would have to buy the final moments needed to complete the formation. Chu Feng accepted it, but not easily. There are moments on the path of cultivation where mercy must wait behind strategy. This was one of them. So long as Tantai Yingming lived, the rescue still had hope. If the hidden experts acted too soon, hope would be buried beneath a swarm of enemy reinforcements. Inside the cell, the 7th brother of the Cursed Soils, 7 stepped toward the wounded Tantai Yingming, filled with killing intent. He cursed him as an ungrateful survivor, someone who had escaped once and dared return against them. His meaning was clear. This loose end should be cut away forever. But the Cursed Soil Sect's headmaster stopped him. That single interruption revealed something more sinister than simple murder. They did not want Tantai Yingming dead yet. They wanted him useful. The headmaster placed a talisman onto Tantai Yingming, and cursed flames immediately spread over him. Tantai Yingming endured without a cry, without movement, without giving the enemy the satisfaction of weakness. That silence mattered. A cultivator's body can be wounded, but if his will remains unbroken, he still has dignity. And for a man standing before enemies who wanted to use his pain as a tool, silence was resistance. The headmaster, however, was not disappointed. He merely changed methods. A second talisman was placed. The flames vanished, leaving Tantai Yingming badly burned and weakened, but still conscious. Then the headmaster activated the true cruelty hidden in the talisman. Green poisonous centipedes crawled out, each carrying a venomous aura. They did not exist for simple killing. Their purpose was suffering. They burrowed into his body and released poison from within, forcing even a peak half-martial emperor to cry out and collapse under the pain. That was when the headmaster turned his attention to Tantai Xue, and now the scheme became clear. This was never only punishment, it was leverage. He explained the nature of those underworld poison centipedes with a smile, telling her that the pain had only just begun. The longer they remained inside Tantai Yingming, the worse the torment would become. He wanted her imagination to do the work. He wanted fear, guilt, and desperation to crush her judgment. Tantai Xue understood immediately. She asked what he wanted. The headmaster produced another talisman, darker and more ominous than the rest, marked with insect-like patterns and glowing with purple cursed light. Even without touching it, one could tell it was not a treasure, but a shackle. He demanded that she swallow it and refine it willingly. Tantai Yingming, even through his agony, shouted a warning. That talisman was the Cursed Soil Sect's puppet talisman. If Tantai Xue accepted and refined it by her own will, she would lose herself completely. Her awareness, her choices, her Tao heart, all of it would be buried under the control of others. And this is why the Cursed Soil Sect was so vile. They did not merely kill enemies. They turned love into a chain. They took a person's desire to save family and twisted it into the door of enslavement. The headmaster did not deny it. In fact, he confirmed it openly. To him, cruelty was not something to hide. He gave Tantai Xue two choices: become their puppet or watch Tantai Yingming suffer until death. For a moment, the entire cell seemed to tighten around that decision. The hidden rescuers still needed time. Tantai Yingming's life was being used as bait. Tantai Xue stood before a choice no cultivator should ever have to make: sacrifice her own will or abandon her kin. And then, before the Cursed Soil Sect scheme could close around her completely, a voice rang out from outside the prison, calm, clear, unafraid. "You are wrong. There is another way." In that instant, the balance inside the cell shifted. The Cursed Soil Sect had used talismans, poison, and fear to force surrender, but a hidden hand had finally moved. And whether that voice belonged to salvation or the beginning of an even greater storm was something the Cursed Soil Sect was about to learn the hard way.